June 6, 1944. The waves off Normandy carried not just soldiers, but fate itself. As dawn broke, thousands of young men stared toward a thin gray line on the horizon, Omaha Beach. None of them knew that, within hours, it would become a graveyard. Machine guns waited behind the cliffs, mines buried under wet sand, mortar shells loaded, safety pins pulled. The Germans were ready. When the landing crafts dropped their ramps, chaos exploded. Bullets tore through the air faster than thought. Blood mixed with seawater. Men fell before they could even take a step. Yet among the screams and smoke, cameras were rolling. A handful of combat cameramen captured the real face of war, raw, unfiltered, and human. This is the story of what really happened that morning, told through their eyes and the men who lived it. By early 1944, Nazi Germany still controlled most of Western Europe. Hitler's Atlantic Wall stretched from Norway to France. Millions of tons of concrete, steel, and barbed wire meant to stop any invasion. But across the Channel, in England, an army was gathering. Over 150,000 Allied soldiers, thousands of ships, and a single goal: to take back Europe. The plan was called Operation Overlord. Its first phase, Operation Neptune, would strike the beaches of Normandy. 5 beaches, each with a code name: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. Omaha was the most heavily defended. Steep cliffs, narrow exits, artillery on the heights. It was defended by Germany's veteran 352nd Infantry Division, men who had fought on the Eastern Front. The Americans knew the risks. General Omar Bradley warned his commanders, "This will be the toughest fight of the invasion." But intelligence underestimated just how strong the Germans were. Meanwhile, weather turned against them. Waves pounded the coast. Clouds blocked reconnaissance flights. A storm threatened to delay the entire operation, but Eisenhower made the call. He gave the order, "Okay, let's go." In the final hours before dawn, Allied troops boarded landing crafts in silence. Some wrote letters home, others prayed. A few joked, hiding their fear under nervous smiles. Far away, German lookouts scanned the sea. They thought the storm had bought them time. They didn't know an invasion fleet, the largest in history, was already on its way. The calm before the storm was at 5:30 a.m. The horizon flickered. Allied warships opened fire. Shells screamed over the dark sea and slammed into German bunkers along the bluffs. The sound was deafening. The sky flashed orange, but for the men inside the landing crafts, it felt distant, like thunder miles away. Then came the order, "Lower the ramps." The first wave of soldiers from the U.S. 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions hit the water at 6:30 a.m., cold, waist-deep, heavy gear pulling them down. Some drowned before reaching the shore. German machine guns waited. MG-42s spat 1,200 rounds per minute. Each burst ripped through the surf, cutting men down like paper targets. Private Charles Shea, a medic from Maine, remembered seeing bodies floating beside him. "I could see the beach ahead," he said, "but it looked impossible to reach." The landing crafts burned. Smoke covered the water. Officers tried shouting orders, but the noise swallowed every word. The men pushed forward anyway, clutching rifles, crawling behind iron obstacles, dragging the wounded, one soldier wrote later. It was as if the sea itself had turned against us. From the cliffs above, German artillery crews adjusted their sights. Mortar rounds exploded among the troops. Every meter forward cost dozens of lives. Sergeant Richard Taylor, a Signal Corps cameraman, was there with a handheld film camera. He filmed through the chaos. His footage would become the only surviving cinematic record of Omaha Beach. Behind him, the second wave approached, unaware the first had been nearly wiped out. They were sailing straight into the same storm of bullets and fire. The invasion had begun, but nothing was going according to plan. By 7:30 a.m., Omaha Beach was chaos. The tide carried bodies and burning wreckage. Entire platoons vanished before even touching dry sand. The radios failed. Commanders had no contact with their men. The plan to move up the beach was collapsing in real time. German gunners on the bluffs fired relentlessly. They had perfect sight lines, every movement below visible through their scopes. The Americans were trapped between the sea and the cliffs. Captain Joe Dawson of the 16th Infantry saw his company shredded by crossfire. He made a desperate choice to climb. Using tank obstacles and shell craters as cover, he and a handful of men began scaling the slope under fire. Each meter upward was a gamble. Mortars burst above them, machine guns stitched the sand below. But somehow they made it to the first ledge. They tossed grenades into a bunker, silencing one of the guns that had pinned them for over an hour. That moment, small, almost invisible amid the chaos, changed everything. One by one, other groups began to move. Medics dragged the wounded behind metal debris. Riflemen fired back, covering each advance. The chaos turned into fragments of resistance. By 8:30, engineers reached the shore. They started clearing mines and cutting through barbed wire under sniper fire. A single Sherman tank, one of the few that survived the landing, crawled up the beach and fired point-blank into a pillbox. For the first time, the Germans began to falter. Ammunition ran low. Communication lines were cut. Some officers couldn't believe what they were seeing. The Americans were actually pushing through. The beach that had looked like certain death was turning into a foothold. But victory had come at a price too heavy to count. By noon, smoke covered the entire coastline. The beach was littered with wrecked vehicles, shattered weapons, and fallen men. The sand had turned red. Engineers and medics worked non-stop. Some dug trenches for cover. Others searched for anyone still breathing. The sound of gunfire faded, replaced by the dull crash of waves. Small groups of soldiers reached the top of the cliffs. They were exhausted, half-deaf, and covered in grime. But they had done what seemed impossible. They broke through the Atlantic wall. On the German side, panic set in. Field reports from Omaha were fragmented. Commanders didn't understand how the Americans were still advancing. They had expected the beach to hold for days, not hours. By 2 p.m., U.S. troops linked up with airborne units inland. They started clearing the villages behind the bluffs. The German defense began to crumble. General Bradley received the first clear message from the beach: Omaha secure. Casualties heavy. In the following hours, more reinforcements arrived. Doctors set up makeshift hospitals. Priests walked among the wounded, giving comfort where they could. The soldiers didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, no victory cry, just silence, and the faces of men who had seen too much. Out of nearly 34,000 men who landed on Omaha that day, over 2,400 were killed, wounded, or missing. Each one had helped turn the tide of the war. But for those who survived, the question remained: was the cost too high? The battle for Omaha Beach became the bloodiest chapter of D-Day, but it also became the key to victory in Western Europe. Once the Americans broke through the cliffs, they opened the path for tanks, artillery, and supplies to pour inland. Within 24 hours, the Allies had a secure beachhead stretching 50 miles along the French coast. From there, they pushed toward Carentan, Saint-Lô, and eventually Paris. The German army, already strained on the Eastern Front, couldn't recover fast enough. The Atlantic Wall, Hitler's proud defense line, was now breached beyond repair. Strategically, Omaha proved one truth: control of the beaches meant control of Europe. It allowed the Allies to bring in millions of tons of fuel, ammunition, and food. It gave Eisenhower the foothold he needed to drive the war toward Germany's heart. But the cost haunted commanders for years. Historians still debate if intelligence errors and poor coordination doomed the first waves unnecessarily. Yet, without their sacrifice, D-Day might have failed entirely. General Bradley later called Omaha the longest day of my life. He wasn't exaggerating. Every decision that morning determined the fate of the entire war. From the beaches of Normandy, the road to Berlin had finally opened. And the men who survived Omaha were the ones who built it, step by step, through blood and grit. Today, Omaha Beach is quiet. Waves roll over the same sand that once carried fire and death. The cliffs are covered in grass. The bunkers still stand, silent reminders of that morning. White crosses stretch across the Normandy cemetery. Each one marks a life cut short, a story unfinished. Visitors walk among them, reading names, ages, and hometowns. Young men who crossed an ocean to free a continent. For those who lived through it, the memories never faded. The screams, the smoke, the friends left behind. They carried those sounds for the rest of their lives. But because they endured, Europe was liberated. Because they refused to stop, tyranny fell. Omaha Beach will always stand as a symbol of courage born in chaos, of men who faced the impossible and won. Their story is not about glory. It's about sacrifice, and it must never be forgotten.